Hey there, I'm Brandon. This is the Dirt Church Devotional. You know, this last week we just celebrated Easter, and Easter got me to thinking about a passage in the book of Numbers, Old Testament, Numbers chapter 16. And in that chapter, there's a story about the Israelites rebelling against Moses and Aaron. They were upset at them and they began to rebel, and by rebelling against Moses and Aaron, in turn, they were actually rebelling against God. And God sent a plague that began to destroy the people. The people started dying left to right. And Moses and Aaron fell on their face before the Lord. And Moses turned to Aaron and he said, "Hey, quick, run and get your censer, fill it with fire from the altar, put incense in it, and run out into the middle of the crowd and make atonement for them, because a plague has started and people are dying." And so Aaron does that. He gets his censer, he fills it with fire from the altar, he puts incense on it, and he runs out in the middle of the crowd of people. And it says that as he made atonement for them, God saw that and stopped the plague, and Aaron was left standing in between the living and the dead, where the plague stopped right there. He said, "Well, that doesn't sound much like a Easter story. I mean, that's Old Testament. You should at least be in the New Testament." Well, bear with me. Let's fast forward. In the New Testament, we know Easter is a celebration of Jesus' resurrection, but before he could rise, he had to die. Okay, and so he was betrayed, he was beaten, he was mocked, he was wrongfully accused, and he was crucified on a cross. And all four gospel writers mention something. All four of them say that Jesus didn't die alone, but there were two criminals that were crucified with him that same day on that same hill. And here's the interesting thing. All four of them say Jesus was crucified in the middle, with one on his right and one on his left. Why is that significant? Well, think about the story we just talked about. And Jesus died in the middle of these two men. And Matthew and Mark both say that both of those men were cursing Jesus. They were mocking him and hurling insults at him, just like the priests were and just like the Romans were. They were fully involved in mocking Jesus and belittling him. These guys dying on a cross, mocking and belittling Jesus. But Luke tells us something different. Luke says that one of the men continued to mock Jesus. The other man, the other thief, turned to Jesus and said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Now, before he said this, he turned to the other criminal that was crucified, and he says, "Don't you fear God? You know, we're getting punished. We're getting what we deserve. But this man has done nothing. He's done nothing to deserve death." Then he turns and says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus' response to him was so powerful. He said, "Believe me, today you'll be with me in paradise." Now, there's no discrepancies between those accounts. It's not that either one of them got it wrong. Here's the reality. That man started out cursing Jesus, but somewhere along the line, as he hung there on the cross for a few hours, and he watched the way that Jesus interacted with the people. He watched the way that he prayed for them as they crucified him. He prayed that God would forgive them, because they didn't know what they were doing. Something changed in his heart to where he realized, man, I'm wrong. This man's right. Jesus, remember me. And shortly after Jesus said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," he breathed his last. He said, "It is finished." And he gave up his spirit. And he died in between two thieves. One who chose life and one who chose death. Jesus was that dividing line between life and death. I'm here to tell you that's what Easter is all about. Before Jesus could rise from the dead 3 days later, he had to be crucified and die. Before we can have a right relationship with Jesus, we got to die to ourselves. We got to surrender and say, "Lord, remember me. Remember me." And if we do that, just like he told the thief on the cross, he will remember you. Chew on that. We'll talk to you next time.